Hey guys, my name is Marta, welcome to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking about Today a Woman Went Mad at the Supermarket by Hilma Wolitzer. This is a short story collection, and most of the stories that make it up were published in the 60s and 70s in multiple journals or magazines, but the last one is a more modern one that was added to the collection right before it was published. As you can probably guess by the title and by the pinkish girlish tones in the cover, this is a book that really discusses traditional feminist topics such as marriage, such as females' positions in relationships and in society in general in the 60s and 70s. Most of the stories have to do with marriages, relationships, and the bonds that are established between a man and his wife, as well as their children and the other people that surround their lives. This is a book that mainly focuses on intimate experiences, so most of the short stories are set inside the main couple's house. In that close environment, we really get to see how their relationships work, what is wrong with them, and how women had to cope with the different difficulties that sometimes happen inside one's marriage or relationship. However, this book is not only about love when it comes to romantic attraction, but also about love when it comes to one's children and motherly love in general. Most of the stories in the book are really short, so we only get to see a very short part in the characters' lives, but one of the most interesting themes of the book is that most of the short stories feature the same characters, so we already know a bit more about them when we have already read a couple of stories. Not all the stories are about the same people, but most of them are, and that I believe is something that is worth highlighting when it comes to this book. As the title also suggests, the stories also focus on mental health and the different mental struggles that women had to go through in the 60s and 70s. Some struggles that are still pretty much alive nowadays, but that were less talked about and were seen as more taboo at this time period. Most of the stories, especially those that focus on the main couple or that protagonize most of the stories, are told in a first-person narrative, which means that you get to feel close to the woman telling the story and that you really get to understand her and her situation. Now, moving on from the themes, when it comes to the writing style, one of the best things I found in this short story collection was Hilma Wolitzer's use of humor. Most of the stories, despite tackling some difficult subject matters and treating themes that might not be the easiest to read about, are written in a very humorous and funny way. Hilma Wolitzer is very sarcastic, very ironic, and the tone she uses at some points really surprises the reader and really makes you understand one of the most common coping mechanisms that are still pretty much alive nowadays. As I said, most of the stories are set in the 60s and 70s, but that does not mean that the themes dealt with are boring or that feel outdated. In fact, the themes treated are, as you can probably tell by what I just said at the beginning of the video, pretty universal and are still prevalent nowadays, and you can still see them inside many people's romantic relationships. However, not, as I also said at the beginning, not all of the stories are set in the 60s and 70s. In fact, the last short story, the most modern one, is set during the COVID pandemic, and it was a story that felt very relatable because we've all went through that, we've all experienced lockdown, and it was a short story that made me feel very nostalgic for that time period. I didn't know I could feel that way, but I did. And it was also a story that brought back so many memories. And also a story that, as it said in the 2020s, features the couple in another moment of their life. So now they are struggling with the fears that all people went through during lockdown. And it was a pretty intriguing, sad relationship that made you see how the character dynamics had changed a little bit, but hadn't that much, and at the same time allows you to see these characters in a way different time period when lots of things have changed. The book is also, despite its humor and ironic tone, pretty sad at some moments, and the way that some women had to cope with some situations in their lives is described as hard as it was. So sometimes, most of the times actually, you can't help but feel sad about the different character situation and the incapability they had to move on from the relationship and from what they were living because of how society used to work in the 20th century. This is overall a book that I highly recommend. It's a really short story collection that, despite dealing with some topics that might not be the easiest to read for everyone, is still very funny, hilarious to read, and very engaging with the reader, since, as I have said, despite having written years ago, it still feels very modern. This is a short story collection that I highly recommend to people who love literary fiction, people who love to read about relationships, especially about how marriages work both in present time and in the 20th century. And it's also a book that I recommend for fans of writers such as Otessa Moshbeck or Annie Ernaux, since there was something in the book that reminded me of both authors. Lastly, I recommend this book to anyone, not only to those who like short story collections, because, as I have said, the fact that the same characters appear in many stories makes the book read more like a novel than a short story collection at some moments, and that is something that maybe people who don't usually like short story collections might enjoy in this one. That is all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, comment down below if you read this book or if you've read anything else by this author. If you have, please tell me which one. Do you recommend me read if I enjoy this one? Because I am pretty excited to discover more works of her. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I hope you guys are amazing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!